Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
So glad to have you with us for the month of February in our February webinar. I'm Dr. Lynette Holder, CEO of the Small Business Association. It is my pleasure to welcome you on our Zoom platform and to welcome you to this month's webinar. Now, for those of you who may not know, let me, by way of little background, share with you that every month the Small Business Association of Barbados organizes a webinar on a topic of interest, a topic that is critical to the small business community and the private sector at large, with the intention of helping our members and helping our partners to do better business, to be aware of issues relative to the business environment, uh, changes in policy and in programming that will impact their business operations. And so today we are very pleased to have you join us in this session as we continue the conversation on the tax prepayment regime. Now, many of you who were with us for our January webinar will recall that we mentioned during that session this new policy framework that's in place and that will obviously impact our small business sector. And we had made a commitment then as your association to continue our lobbying, continue our education on this new regime. Following that webinar then, we would have shared with our members and our partners via our email blast the first guidance note that came out from the Barbados Revenue Authority that was sent on the 29th of January. And as we reviewed that guidance note, we realized that there were some areas that we needed to maybe have a continued focus on and education about, and discussion with the regulators on. And so there were some changes made to that initial guidance note following intense lobbying by the SBA. And we received a second guidance note on February 4th. We sent that out to you. And again, we realized that though there were efforts made to improve on that first policy note, that we still had some areas that we needed to have further conversation around because there was some ambiguity still, and some concerns amongst the small business community in particular. And so we felt this month that we will continue the conversation, and we'll do so in collaboration with one of our strategic partners, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados. Lisa Padmore, as you know, the executive director there, has collaborated with us in the past, as well as members of ICAB's Tax Committee in prior sessions, and we felt it was important today to have them collaborate with us in this webinar for the month of February. We continue the conversation on the tax prepayment regime. Now, before we get to our presentation, let me, by way of housekeeping, remind you that all of our sessions are recorded. In the event that you miss any aspect of it, fear not, all of our sessions are recorded. And within a few days after today's webinar, you'll be able to review this presentation on the SBA TV, as well as on our YouTube channel. Also, throughout the presentation, we'll ask that you keep your mics muted. As we are recording the session, we want our presenter to be able to speak unencumbered. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to receive your questions and or comments, and we're going to use the chat feature on this platform. So if you have questions, if you have queries for our presenter today, we'll ask that you kindly place those in the chat feature on this platform. At the end of the presentation, we'll go there to receive your comments. Also, we will post in the chat feature at the end a short survey, just about 5-6 questions. We're asking you to please share your thoughts on today's session, answer the few questions that we've placed there to give us feedback on our webinar. As you'll appreciate, we are constantly looking for areas to improve, and your feedback is a part of that process. So please assist us in collecting that feedback information at the end of our session. Now, again, as you know, our webinars usually just about an hour. Chris, 11 to 12. We may go over extra 10 minutes or so, depending on your queries and the conversation after the presentation, obviously, depending on our facilitator as well for today. So let me let you know a little bit about our presenter this morning. We're very pleased to have Mrs. Tara Collymore Kirton, and she is a tax and legal partner at Deloitte here in Barbados. She has over 16 years experience in audit and tax in this particular field. Her extensive experience encompasses a wide range of services, including tax compliance, advisory services, corporate and individual income tax planning for clients across domestic, regional, and international markets. Tara has a proven track record of success across diverse industries. She's spearheaded numerous high-profile engagements, including due diligence, tax advisory, and restructuring projects. Notably, she has played a key role in optimizing the corporate structures of multilaterals operating in Barbados. She's also assisted small and medium enterprises with becoming compliant with the tax laws in Barbados. And for sure, we are definitely interested in this latter part, as you know, the majority of our audience today comprise small and medium enterprises. Tara holds a Bachelor of Science in Banking and Finance and is a highly respected professional, being both a certified a certified professional accountant of Canada and a fellow of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants. So we have this morning, colleagues, you would agree from that very short bio, someone that is very competent and capable to address our topic today. Tara is also a member of ICAB's Tax Committee. So again, for those who may be new to our webinar series, welcome to the SBA's webinar for the month of February. Thanks so much for the time that you're going to share with us today. We turn over now to our specially invited guest, Mrs. Tara Collymore Kirton, to share with us on this topic of the tax prepayment regime. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you, Dr. Holder. Just give me a few minutes just to ensure that the participants can see my screen. And if I can just get a verbal confirmation that
yes,
my
we
screen...
can see your screen. Go right
okay,
ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I would just like to have a special welcome to the members of the SBA, as well as any members of the ICAB Association, as well as other members from the Barbados Revenue Authority, as well as other participants. So I apologize in advance for my voice. I'm now recovering from a cold, so bear with me as I might have to stop to sip some water throughout the presentation. So as Dr. Holder mentioned this morning, the topic today is prepayments, specifically relating to small businesses. And before we get there, I'd just like to share the agenda where we will be discussing the Barbados tax landscape. We'll look at the tax regime applicable to small business, prepayments for small businesses, reductions and waivers for small businesses, the penalties and interests that are incurred for failure to make prepayments and file tax returns, as well as registration under the new small business portal. So as many of you would be aware, in 2023, Barbados undertook a major tax reform to comply with global tax policies. This resulted in our standard corporation tax rate being moved from 5.5% to 9%, with the exception of the regimes noted below, which would be insurance companies, international companies, in-scope multinationals, and small businesses. In, I think it was 2024, when the amendment to the Income Tax Act was made, it spoke to the tax rate being reduced to small businesses to 5.5%, or keeping the same for small businesses at 5.5%. If the gross income of said business was not more than $2 million, and if the company was registered as a small business. By way of policy note, which was issued on the 3rd of February 2025, the definition for those eligible for the 5.5% was then expanded to these 5 conditions. Noted, I just wanted to take a minute here to note that this definition is a bit different from what we are accustomed to under the Small Business Act, and it was expanded not to only, based on our understanding, not to only include small businesses, but to expand the meaning to also include those entities who may be a small business but not necessarily registered under the Small Business Act. So based on conversations that were had with the various government departments, the definition was, by this policy note, was expanded to include these 5 conditions, whereby gross income had to be 2 million or less, paid up capital 1 million or less, no more than 25 employees, and the shares must be 75% owned by a resident of Barbados. And number 5 basically indicates that if you're part of a group, that you should meet every member within that group should meet the conditions 1 to 4. In addition to meeting these 5 conditions, if you are an approved small business under the Small Business Development Act, then you would also be eligible for the 5.5%. Companies that were specifically excluded from the definition of small businesses and would not be eligible for the 5.5% would be companies or societies that hold a foreign currency permit, companies that are granted concessions under other enactments, whether it be the Tourism Development Act, the Special Development Areas Act, or companies whose primary business is the holding of shares or real estate. So now that we've defined basically those that are small businesses and those that are eligible for the 5.5%, I will go straight into prepayments. So nothing much has changed with respect to small businesses, with respect to prepayments currently, as now they're required to make either 1 or 2 prepayments of 50%, dependent on when the company's year-end is. So if you have a year-end between January and September, your prepayment date would be 15th, and that would be 1 prepayment. If your year-end is between October and December, then you're required to make 2 prepayments of 50% each, and those will be made on the 15th of December of the current year, or the 15th of March of the following year. Any balances that are due would be done upon filing, if your filing deadline is the 15th of March or the 15th of June. The prepayments are calculated at 50% of the preceding year. So using 2024 as an example, you would calculate your prepayment of 50% of the 2023 prepayment. So in this particular example, if your tax payable was $1,000, 50% of that would be $500, and you will be due to pay that on the 15th of December 2024 and the 15th of March 2025. If it is the case that you are a newly formed company, then you would indicate upon registration in TAMAS for your TIN, you will indicate what your estimated taxable income would be, and that would be used to calculate the prepayment for the upcoming year. This is not particularly a new legislation. What is happening is that it is basically being enforced. So previously, while it was there, companies were not penalized for not making the prepayments at the specific periods. These prepayments are to be made in TAMAS and not using the global relationship portal as other companies would be required to do. So again, if you don't fall into the monthly and you fall into those eligible for the 5.5, you would make the prepayments of either 1 or 2 depending on your year end. Such companies again are required, they're required to either make a requested reduction or a waiver of any prepayments if you anticipate that your income for the current year would be lower than what it was for the preceding year. This should be done 30 days prior to your prepayment deadline. So if your deadline is the 15th of September, you should make that request by the 15th of August. If your deadline is the 15th of December, then you should make that request by the 15th of November. You can do so by logging into TAMAS, selecting the tracker, other installments, a new inquiry, and submit your request for the reduction. To support your request, it's always recommended that you either submit draft management accounts, financial statements, or if those are not ready as yet, you can provide projected income statement, which will show the reduction in the income that you expect for the year. You should also upload a draft computation showing that there's a reduction in the taxable income so that the 50% can be applied to that reduced taxable income. And this is basically what TAMAS would look like when you're making the request. Failure to make prepayment results in the imposition of penalties and interest. So if you don't make any payments and you're required to do so, then you would be charged a penalty of 10% of the amount due, and then interest of 0.5% per month that it remains, the prepayment remains unpaid. Similarly, if the corporation tax return is not filed on time, there are penalties and interest imposed. Here, I just included an example just to give, I guess, a little bit of indication of how it would look if your prepayment was $500 and no payment was made by the deadline of September 15th. You will be charged 10% of the payment of 500 would be 10% of that would be the 50, and then you will be charged the 0.5% for each month that it remains outstanding. In this particular example, it assumes that the payment was made by October, and therefore you only charge interest of each month. If the payment remains outstanding, say up to the point of the filing, then you would incur, I would say, about 7 months from September up to March of interest, which should be paid on the 15th when you are filing your tax return. For those, as I mentioned, there is a new portal for the small businesses. And for those interested in becoming an approved small business, the applications can be done through a single registration process. The process, assuming a new company, would automatically register you with the Barbados Revenue Authority, the Customs and Excise Department, National Insurance Department, and obviously the Small Business Association. The portal is expected to be launched in the upcoming weeks, and we just included some screenshots of how the portal would basically look. If you are already registered with TAMAS and the National Insurance Department, you would include that information while you are registering on the portal. It would include the nature of your business, the number of directors, your shareholders, and the date you were registered. You would also upload any documentation that is required for the small business application, which would be the financial statements or the financial projections, as well as any share certificate showing the ownership of the shareholders of the company. Okay, and that ends the presentation. I'm going to, I guess, give a few minutes, as I am sure there will be some questions.
All right, thank you very much, Tara, for the overview this morning. Again, let me reiterate, colleagues, that we've had 2 guidance notes on this matter so far. Admittedly, there are still a few questions that we need clarification on. This is why we are continuing the conversation today. I wish also, before we get into the Q&A, please place your questions, comments in the chat. I'll ask Tara to assist us as we go through the chat to look at the questions, comments. Let me preface this segment by indicating to all on the call, members of the association, that we've discussed having a demonstration of the portal with our members, facilitated by the Barbados Revenue Authority, and the Revenue Commissioner has confirmed this for us. So we will arrange to have a demonstration of the portal for our members, our partners, so persons can understand what is required to navigate that portal and the information that is to be uploaded on the platform, and obviously to ask any questions and so on that they may have as we go through this. So let me let you know, fear not, we will be sending out a flyer with the date and time for this demonstration in a few days. We are aiming to have this obviously before the upcoming March 15th deadline. I think, Tara, that's the first deadline that's coming up, March 15th. So we want to be able to have that demonstration before then. Okay, so please stay tuned to our networks, our social media platforms, etc. We will provide that information as soon as the Revenue Commissioner has confirmed the date and time for us. So in summary, we've requested a demonstration of that portal. I would have had a preliminary review of it, and I know that they've gone back to do some tweaking and so on, and we're going to bring that to our members and our partners very shortly, so you can see what the portal looks like and the information that is being requested of you to upload on the platform. So let's turn our attention, Tara, to a few questions. I mentioned at the beginning that there's still maybe some ambiguity in the second guidance note, colleagues, is because it has always been our understanding that the 5.5% is being earmarked, if you will, for small businesses. Okay, and if that is the case, then you would anticipate that the definition of small business will be used. I think the second guidance note suggested otherwise, because the small business is defined according to the Small Business Act 1999, amended 2006. And that definition, Tara would have shared briefly with us in her presentation. That definition now seems to be expanded. So it is creating still a little, a little concern in the minds of persons relative to the definition that can access this 5.5%. But we have it on good authority that additional information should be coming soon to further clarify that. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. From where we sit at the SBA, we believe that the 5.5% should really be earmarked for small businesses, and if anything, you should be using the legislation that defines a small business to determine who should be benefiting from that 5.5%. So let's begin, Tara, the conversation, because I think that the the richness of the presentation today will be in your responses to the various queries and questions and so on that our colleagues have posted in the chat. So if we can go there now and see, we have Janine. I believe you're seeing the question here. Should a company meet the 5 requirements to qualify for taxation as a small business, but in 1 year achieve just over $2 million? Would taxes be charged at the small business rate? And this again goes to that ambiguity we were talking about. Tara, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, sure. So based on my understanding, yes, they should still qualify for the small business rate, but they probably will need to provide some, I would say, information to the Revenue Authority to show that, well, they have made over the 2 million for that particular year, that they should still be considered a small business. So if in the event the said business, say for example, is an approved small business, and they have a license, then that should be uploaded to support the fact that even though they're over the 2 million, that they are still eligible for the 5.5%.
Okay. And Glenda, I want to make sure you understand your question here. You're saying, just to be clear, you don't need to register with, and I assume that SBA there is Small Business Act and not Small Business Association. So just to be clear, relative to your question, because colleagues, let's appreciate that, there are two groups in a sense that are being discussed here. There's the small business, all right, and then there's the approved small business, and that is what for us, at least at the SBA, has been creating some consternation. There is the small business, and the small business has a particular definition. And then there's the approved small business, which is what, yes, government has been trying to get persons to apply for that status, to become an approved small business. And the SBA is on record in making the point that the government really needs to rethink this and to do away completely with the whole concept of an approved small business, and just simply allow the business, if it meets the conditionality of a small business as per the act, then let them benefit from the 5.5%. Now I have it on good authority that something like that is coming, but I don't want for us to go with that until it is written down in black and white. But at least we have on good authority that has been deliberated on right now, and a policy change should be coming, because that is creating some confusion. As it is now, there are about less than 150 approved small businesses in Barbados. Approved small businesses. So if we go by the guidance note, you will get the impression that the 5.5% is only going to be applicable to those 100, let's call them 150. It's wrong at all. To those 150 businesses. And that is not the intention, because government obviously wouldn't want to just incentivize 150 businesses. So you want to broaden the net, and therefore the wider definition of small business is what is under consideration. Tara mentioned in one of her presentations the 5 criteria that's there. And based on your question, Glenda, as it is now, as you input the data into the portal, that data is, in a sense, will allow the Revenue Authority to determine that you are indeed a small business because of that information that you're sharing on the portal. In other words, that you gross less than 2 million, you have less than 25 employees, etc., etc., etc. So Glenda, if I'm not clear, you can also put a follow-up comment there for us. So Tara, I'm seeing Veronica is asking if we did not make any profit, what is required refiling?
So there would be no prepayment required, but you would still be required to make to file your corporation tax returns.
Yes, and that's a fact. So even if, there's no profit, you still have to complete the, what I call the administrative process of filing and putting the information, because the authority still needs to have that information on your firm. Yeah. I hope that, Veronica, that answered your question. Let's go to another one. Randall, querying on holding companies with real estate and having commercial activity. Is it applicable?
So based on the recent tax update seminar, the Revenue Commissioner had indicated that where we have a company that's carrying on multiple businesses, that they should be eligible for the 5.5 once that the holding company is not the primary business. So if you're in the particular question here from Randall, if it's the case that the real estate is the primary business of the company altogether, then they would not be eligible. But if it is the case that the company, say, is 70% commercial activity and only 30% real estate, then the company should be eligible for the 5.5.
All right, trust that, Randall. That answers that query. Let's take another. Michael is asking you, Tara, to kindly clarify the prepayment due dates and the conditions for each.
Okay.
That was in an earlier
So
slide.
yes. So if your company has a year end between January and September, then you're required to make a prepayment by the 15th of September. If you require a determination, a reduction, or a waiver of a prepayment, you make that request by the 30 days before the 15th of September. So that would be the 15th of August. For the reduction or waiver of the prepayment. If your year end is between October and December, then you're required to make two prepayments. One on the 15th of December of the current year. So using 2025 as an example, if you're required to make a prepayment, then your first prepayment is due on the 15th of December, 2025. Your second prepayment is due on the 15th of March, 2026. Your corporation tax is due on the 15th of June, 2026. Again, this is if your year-end falls October to December. If your year-end falls January to September, your filing deadline is the 15th of March, 2025.
Yeah, okay. I'm seeing a lot of questions here on the eligibility criteria, Tara. I'm wondering if it's possible that you can share your screen again and just put up that slide that showed the 5 areas, because I'm seeing a few questions here seeking clarification on what is here listed as the 5 areas. And colleagues, let's appreciate that these criteria are listed in the second guidance note that we sent out on the 4th, right? The second guidance note. And as I prefaced earlier, I think that is what is creating some consternation. So let's take a look at that, because the 5 criteria there listed, Tara, include at number 5 that the prior 4 must be met. So actually number 5 is meeting of the prior 4, if you will. So yes, that's right. So if you can maybe put that slide up again, because I'm seeing a couple of questions here where persons are seeking clarification on the 5 criteria that are listed here on that slide.
Okay.
I see
You
Sean.
can let me know if you can see the
Sean
screen.
is asking about that. Yeah. Pravina is asking. Ayuba Cola is also asking about that. So let's take a look at the 5 criteria. And again, members in particular, this is in the guidance note of February 4th that was shared earlier.
Dr. Holder, can you let me know if you can see my screen?
Right now we're not seeing the screen, so
Okay.
if you can try sharing,
Yeah.
that would help. Yeah. All right, so yes, it's coming up now. There you go. So this is the slide. You can maybe give a little further clarification, Tara, on this one, because we have a couple of questions on this slide.
Okay, so just to confirm, or just to clarify, so this definition of small business is by policy, no, and it is separate and different from what is the definition of small business under the Small Business Act. So I think that may be what is causing the confusion because the two definitions are different. And but based on my understanding that once you fall into one of the two definitions, then you're eligible for the 5.5. So if there's instances where persons do not fall in, say, I know gross income is a big one, where the gross income for sure is over the 2 million, but the person may be an approved small business. In that case, the company would still be eligible for the 5.5%. As Dr. Holder noted, there are plans to amend the Income Tax Act to include a expanded definition of the term. So hopefully that definition will bring more clarity, perhaps even removing and making it or a condition where you only have to meet one of the 5 conditions. However, as it stands right now, for the policy note, you have to meet all 5 conditions or be an approved small business under the Small Business Development Act.
Okay. Thanks very much for that. I can I can only add, Tara, as I've said before, that the authorities are aware. They are aware of what I call ambiguity. This is my word. I'm calling it that ambiguity. So they are aware of it, and they've given an undertaking that it will be further amended going forward. Yeah.
I also,
Yes, go
Dr.
ahead.
Holder, I just
Yes.
wanted to, from one of the questions I'm seeing here, I just want to make it clear that the prepayments only apply to companies. So if you are a registered business, you will not be considered a company, and therefore the prepayments that we're referring to here would not be applicable to you.
Yeah. Very good. So yes, someone asked that about being self-employed. No, self-employed persons are not required to make the prepayments. The prepayments are for companies, so limited liability companies, etc. So not the sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just wanted to add here, if you are self-employed, there is a installment requirement similar to a prepayment, but that wouldn't be applicable here. So everything that we have here is applicable to companies. Self-employed persons who are taxed at an individual rate are subject to other installments not mentioned
Okay.
here. Yeah.
All right. So did you see Lois question? A very good question here. We can maybe Tara take a stab at that one. It's a very good question. If a small business as per the new guidance note registered and made a monthly prepayment under the global portal in January, what should that business be doing now going forward?
So
You
if
see
the
Mm-hmm.
small business is eligible for the 5.5, then it shouldn't have made the prepayment under the global portal. We do understand that because the guidance note only came out, the policy note only came out subsequent to persons making the payment, that person would have gone ahead and still made the payment to be compliant with what was previously announced. My understanding is those prepayments are supposed to be transferred to Thomas and it would be applied, I'm going to assume still for the income year 2025, because that's where they were made. However, the BRA will be issuing guidance on that for those entities those eligible for the 5.5 that would have already made payments under the global portal for income year 2025. Because in essence, they would have technically prepaid a year in advance.
Yes. Very true. And we actually do have about 3 or so questions I'm seeing on that point. And Terry, yes, I believe the Revenue Commissioner did make that point at the tax seminar hosted by ICAB, that those payments will be transferred into TAMIS. So yes, that point was made by the Revenue Commissioner herself. So I hope that you're seeing Deborah's question. If you could take a stab at this one as well.
Being in business with 3 employees. I called Barbados BRA for advice in terms of reverse tax credit. I was told I need to get an accountant. If this is in relation to the reverse tax credits specifically, I believe you would have to still upload all of the information relating to the employees. And then that would trigger how the employees would, how they would apply, if they would be eligible for the reverse tax credit or not.
Okay. And thanks again. Stephanie is asking a follow-up question here. About the companies had to that made prepayments prior to January 31st. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so those would be similar, where I'm going to assume that they will be applied to income year 2025 in TAMAS. It would be great if they could be applied to income year 2024, but I'm going to assume that they will be applied to income year 2025 in TAMAS. And I think some of the confusion lied with persons probably eligible for the 5.5, but making the payments under the global relations. So I think that triggered the BRA to issue the policy note to clarify further that they would have been required to make the payments under the global relations portal.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
for any payments that are made there, they should be transferred hopefully by next month into the TAMAS, so that they
yes.
can be applied to the respective income year.
Yeah. Well, the enhanced lobbying also helped to trigger it, Tara. I see another question here. What's the recommended time frame for registering with TAMIS after starting a business? I'm assuming this is a company.
So after a company is incorporated, I would say you should do it as soon as you receive your certificate of incorporation. One of the big mistakes we see is persons incorporating an entity, and because the company is not doing any activity, they tend not to register for a TIN, or they tend not to file any tax returns. But once the entity is incorporated, it is required to file a tax return. So they should obtain a TIN as soon as possible. I believe most banks as well are now requesting to open a bank account with a bank. They are requesting your tax identification number. So as soon as the incorporation is completed, it makes sense to apply. So I would say probably a day or 2 after you receive your certificate of incorporation.
At least within a week.
Within a week.
At least within a week, you should seek to register. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to clarify the issue of the real estate type business though, Tara. I mean, I'm seeing another question here about that.
Sure.
Could you shed some light on this for us, this category of business? It says to clarify, if a company holds real estate, it is not considered a small business, even if it meets all the other criteria regarding revenue, employees, etc.
Yes, that's correct. So if a company holds real estate or shares in another company, then they would not be eligible for the 5.5%, and therefore are required to pay the 9% and make the monthly prepayments if they are if they do have taxable income.
That's something that we may need to look at, because why the discrimination? I mean, if the business is within the definition of small pursuant to the act, it really doesn't matter the area of economic activity, does it?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, but the assumption is that usually companies that are holding real estate are companies that that is their secondary source of income. And therefore, I believe that is why they are not eligible for the 5.5.
All right, we have to definitely pick this up with the Revenue Commissioner when we have her on the SBA's platform in another few days, because as they are reviewing different pieces of legislation to make sure that there's congruence, across the regime, then this is maybe one of those things that we ought to add into the conversation as well. Because I'm not sure why you're discriminating against an industry. It is a legally operating business. I'm not clear why you're doing that. Yes, I know that there's a view. I think I heard this point being made, that the real estate may not be the primary business. It could be a secondary one and so on. But what happens if it is the primary business of the firm?
And the company will be required to pay the 9%,
9%.
unfortunately.
Yes. So we have to look at that and add that to the conversation, because if they meet all the other criteria, $2 million, under 25 employees, etc., then they should have a legal expectation, a justifiable expectation that they can pay the 5.5%. Let's take a few more before we wrap up. I'm seeing Tara, I hope you are too, John's question.
Yes, regarding
Yes.
the prepayment.
Yes.
Yes. I think a few companies would have made the prepayment in January based on the first policy note, and then given the second policy note, they weren't required to make the prepayment. As I said, I honestly believe it should be applied to income year 2024, but given that the payments were made for income year 2025, chances are that they would be held until that income year.
Right.
So
So,
the
I
tax return
remember,
is not due to the income year 2026. So
yeah,
technically, you made a payment for a year in advance for being compliant.
right. I remember at the tax seminar, during the break, a few of us were chatting, persons were asking about the Small Business Act and so on. And I had to make the point, Barbadians are compliant people. If it's one thing, those on the call, you've done work elsewhere, you know this for a fact. Barbadians are generally compliant. So yes, you have a requirement that you have to pay your tax by X. Persons, rush to comply and make those payments. So yes, there are many that would have sought to honor the requirement and make their payments in January, only to realize that this is it's still a work in progress, and there's some issues to be addressed, but we have it on good authority, as Tara rightly mentioned, that the adjustment will be made. Colin, I don't quite understand your intervention here. Of course, we will seek to ensure that both the RC and the Ministry of Finance are given relevant information as we seek to continue our representation of the sector. So yes, that is definitely going to happen. That's a fait accompli. We're going to make sure that as we continue our collaboration with ICAB and others, that we give the information that is relevant to the authorities. I think, Jason, if you were there at the tax seminar, Jason made a very valiant point, worthy of repetition, Tara, and that is that we need all the pieces of legislation and the policies and so on to align. I think that is the issue that we're seeing now. They're, you know, one piece of legislation says one thing, a policy note says something else, another piece of legislation says a different thing. And so in an effort to bring this new regime to the market, there was a need, in my view at least, to have your technical folks look at all the different pieces of legislation that, you know, would impact this new regime, and to have the necessary amendments made to make sure that there's congruence and that persons are not confused in the process. I thought that was a takeaway from me in that presentation, and worthy of repetition. I'm sharing it here now, and that's our view, that then there was a need to have all of those pieces of legislation and policies and so on reviewed and amended, so that, you know, there's complementarity going forward. So let's take the final two then, Tara, please, if we can. Sean and Lisa.
I think most of the other questions, I believe this one more is a question for you regarding whether a real estate company can be registered under the Small Business Development Act.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm hearing beyond you, Tara. Is that my fault? I'm hearing someone else
Not
saying
sure.
something else. No? Okay. Let me go to that one. So in the interim, can we also look at what Sean is asking or saying? Not only about the prepayments, but to actual tax filing. Is there any news on the ability to file corporation tax returns for 2024?
I believe the Revenue Commission indicated that the return should be available in early March. But we haven't seen it being released as yet. So I'm going to assume that it should be released by next week
Right.
to
Okay.
allow for filings by the following week.
Right. All right. I'm seeing Lisa asking a question here. Is a Kafisha, that I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Kafisha Francis from the Barbados Revenue Authority is on the call and
Yes.
wants to make a comment. Is that what I'm understanding the point
good.
from you, Lisa? If that's the case, just clarify that for us before we wrap up.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry. No, I was saying that
Oh.
Kafisha Francis is on the call from the BRA, and I didn't know if Kafisha wanted to make any clarification, because ICAB is not aware that the tax return is available as yet for filing of corporate tax returns. ICAB is following up on an official extension with the Ministry of Finance for the filing of year ends between January and September, which would have been due on March 15th, because of the tax return being available even at today's date does not provide tax agents who have multiple clients sufficient time to meet the deadlines. And so therefore, the commissioner at our tax event would have acknowledged that it is something that could be considered, but the relevant arm of government that makes that decision would be the Ministry of Finance. So we're pursuing that.
Okay. Thanks very much for that intervention, Lisa. If Kafisha is on and wants to make an intervention, that's great. We would welcome that. Don't want to put you on the spot. Yes, I'm sitting here, Kafisha Francis. Don't want to put you on the spot, but if you do want to make an intervention before we wrap up, please do so.
Hi, good morning. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning, Dr. Holder. Not much to say. I think the presenter delivered the information very clear and so quite accurate with respect to the Q&A. I'd just like to emphasize the fact that one, the policy note or any policy note that the Revenue Authority would issue would be based on the Income Tax Act, because that's the instrument that we administer. So the language will flow from there in terms of the definition and the classification. So hence the reason why you wouldn't, or you are not seeing at this time the same thing that is in the Small Business Development Act. I think the minister and the revenue commissioner would have indicated that it is not the intention to remove the opportunity for small businesses to benefit from the 5.5% rate. And we are looking at it based on all of the questions that was made at the ICAB session and notes of the questions that was raised here today, to take it back for further discussion. And the amendment is in the pipeline to happen so that taxpayers can have greater clarity with respect to their tax position and what is required. So that is basically what I would add to the discussion in the forum.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kafisha Francis. We appreciate that. So folks, you're hearing it. Exclusive even. And we can use that term. That, rightly so, the BRA administers the Income Tax Act, not the Small Business Act, but the authorities recognize that there's a need to have a review, and that review is on its way. It's being done as we speak. And so we anticipate in short order we should be seeing further amendments, because it is not the intention of government to disadvantage small businesses from benefiting from this reduced rate of 5.5% on taxable income. So you've heard it there. And we're appreciative of those discussions that are on the way. I want to reiterate again, colleagues, that we hope to bring the authorities from the BRA on our platform very soon, in another week or so, to take us through a demonstration of that portal, because we want our members, our colleagues, our partners to have an appreciation for what the portal looks like, how to navigate it, what's the information required to be uploaded in the portal going forward. Tara, I think there's one set of questions that we didn't touch on, and it has to do with the real estate issue. I'm not sure if within the Small Business Development Act, because one of the criteria there was equity. The paid up equity, as you know, had to be less than $1 million. I'm not so sure if that has some contribution to the reason why that may be excluded, because of the anticipation that your equity may very well exceed that particular criteria. I'm not sure if you want to make a comment on that before we wind up.
I think it was probably excluded from the point of view of, again, the expectation is that most persons with companies that own real estate, or they're using it as a secondary source of income, not their main source of income. So the assumption is, I'm presuming, I can't speak on behalf of the Barbados Revenue Authority, but the assumption is that is the reason why they were probably specifically excluded. However, I'm sure that we can make a petition to see if we can get it included.
Yes, that is my position too. I think that's where I stand at the end of the session for sure. A takeaway for me would be to see if we can have that included. And I don't want to leave.
Sorry, this is Lisa again. My apologies for interrupting.
Please.
I think what's important on that last point, with regards to particularly real estate, when we go forward with any kind of argument as for why things need to be changed, we also need to go forward with some data. And I think that one of the things that we need to represent, for example, is that, that proportion of companies that owns, let's say, real estate that's under $750,000, which would represent, a relatively decent sized house for, let's say, a small business to a middle class family downwards. If that is the case, then we need to go back and say, okay, there are only 100,000 of those in Barbados. The revenue on that is X. And so therefore, what would you be losing by reducing the tax rate to 5.5? And I think that just in general, from a policy perspective, when we go to ask for, I call these concessions, because this is what they would be referring to them as, we also need to provide the data. And that's really more to the small business and ICAB to say to its members, in order for us to make an argument, we also need to show behind that what is the substance, what is the reason why we're asking it, because either persons are a vulnerable group and they will be impacted by these changes, or really you're not losing a lot by moving the tax rate down. So just adding that to say to others that we will advocate for you, but at the same time, we need your assistance in making these points to government as it sets policy in order for us to have any kind of movement on the needle as it relates to government and their changes. So thank you very much for the opportunity to say something.
Yeah, thanks to you too, Lisa. And final comment, Tara. I think we don't want to leave without responding to Joan's query. This is a small business person, I know, so let's see what assistance we can give here. We can take a look at that quickly. Just give us a quick response to Joan's question.
Yeah, so John's question is, if my business already submitted an application for approved small business status manually, do I need to register via the new portal also? I would say yes, you should register. I think that would expedite the matter.
Yeah. Okay. And John, rest assured, as I said earlier, that we will seek to have that demonstration shortly, so that persons can see what the portal is requiring, what's the documentation that's required of small business owners to submit. All right, Tara, final thoughts, words from you in 60 seconds, your final closing comments.
I guess my closing comments would be more around, I guess most of the comments that we've heard here today have been heard before. And I believe the Dr. Holder, as well as the CEO of ICAB, they're advocating for some of the changes to be made. And I guess based on your comments, as Dr. Holder said, if you have any comments that you want to share, please share them in the survey so that these can be articulated to the government department so that we can advocate for any changes. Unless we hear from you, we wouldn't know what changes need to be made. So
agreed. Very good. Very good closing comments. And colleagues, please, if you go to the chat now, you'll see that the link is there. Please click on the link and give us your feedback on today's session. And obviously in that very short survey, we want, any recommendations that you have for the future. This is always important for us as we plan our programming going forward. So thanks very much to everyone for spending the last hour with us on this call as we continue the conversation on the tax prepayment regime, trying to simplify this information as much as we can for the small business community in particular. Let me thank Mrs. Tara Collymore Kirton, a member of the ICAB Tax Committee, and also a tax and legal partner at Deloitte. I also have to thank Lisa Padmore, the Executive Director of ICAB, for partnering with us again for another wonderful session. And Kafisha Francis, I want to thank you too from the BRA for your short intervention and more importantly, for the continued collaboration as well with the various business support organizations, Kafisha, in ensuring that we understand, the overall tax regime and how we can navigate going forward. So thank you too. And thanks to all of our members, our partners for being with us. Again, as I said at the beginning, if you missed any aspect of the presentation, fear not. The session is recorded and will be made available in a few days on SBA's TV and on our YouTube platform that you can go back and you can review. Obviously, the presentation will be there as well, and even that you want to, refresh yourself with any of the points that were made. So that's it for us for another of our webinars. Listen out First of all, for that session with the Revenue Authority on the demonstration of the new portal for the small businesses in particular, and also the date coming up for our March webinar, where we're going to be turning our attention to what's happening now with artificial intelligence and the new digital environment that we're in. So once again, thank you. God bless you all. See you on the next occasion. Bye-bye for now. Thanks again, Tara.
You're welcome. Bye.